So I was asked to give you 7 lessons that I learned from my mother, and for the first time in my life, I'm going to read it from a paper, because I can't remember 7 things. Somebody once said, there are these comedians who have one-liners. Their jokes are all one-liners, because they can't remember 2 lines in a row. So we wrote them down. 7 things. Of course, there are much more, but 7 is a popular number. Number 1, I think the most fundamental of all things, attitude towards life. Now, many people in their family, and their grandparents, great-grandparents, we all went through difficult times. They lived through the war. They lived through the hunger, the horrors, the anti-Semitism, the fear. That our grandparents all had in common. My mother lived through that time. My father went through some dangerous activities, survived an imprisonment in communist Czechoslovakia, in Prague. We actually have a whole book on my father's activities, because it was heroic. He did heroic things. He went into dangerous places. He risked his life to save Jews from communism. But as we read all of these things, my father did this, my father went there, my father was in jail, and you have to ask, while all that was going on, and where was Mommy? So like all the great women in Torah, it's all quiet, it's all modest, it's all unheralded. The husband gets all the praise. And where is the mother? Where is the wife? Where she needs to be. Always where she needs to be. So, the first thing is the joy of life. Having such difficulties, living through such difficult times, how do you maintain a healthy attitude towards life? Joie de vivre. Today we have these difficulties. So spoiled. So spoiled. There's an old television show about a policeman lecturing these teenage delinquents. And he says, you know what your problem is? This is in 1950 something. He says, you know what your problem is? You're spoiled. You dial 7 numbers, you can talk to anybody anywhere in the world. You're spoiled. Today, can it dial 7 numbers? Who would want to do that? So, every generation has its problems. So one of the things about attitude towards life, whatever was going on, my mother found the exact appropriate insight into her life. For every occasion, for every era, for every period in her life, there was something that she could do, and she could do it well, and that made life wonderful. She reinvented herself many times as the occasion called for it. We can learn from that. Like that famous story about the guy who didn't get angry when his wife destroyed the Erig, which he had bought at the expense of his tefillin. You know the story. What was the secret there? The secret was he reinvented himself according to what needed to happen. When it was weekday, he had tefillin. That was his life. When it was Yom Tov and he didn't need tefillin, he bought an Erig. That was his life. When for whatever reason there was no longer an Erig, he got up and danced. Why? Because that's what you do on Yom Tov. So whatever the occasion was, he found the proper response, and that made life exciting. If it's weekday and you have tefillin, that's all you need. If it's Erev Yom Tov, you buy an Erig, that's all you need. There's no Erig, but it's Yom Tov, so you dance. That's all you need. That was number one. My mother had an incredible talent. She always knew what to say to whoever it was that she was talking to. Young, old, family, not family, observant, non-observant, somewhat observant, formerly observant, observant in the future. She always had the right thing to say. And there's a great wisdom behind that. To be able not only to make conversation, that's a talent too. Just to be able to make conversation with all sorts of people, from the greatest to the simplest. But to actually be able to say exactly what needs to be heard and what needs to be said, that is really a wisdom that is enviable. Certainly admirable. There are people who are gifted in this way. And how does it express itself? Anyone you talk to will say, oh, yeah, my best friend. Oh, yeah, she was my best friend. She liked me the most. Everyone was convinced of that. Because how else can you know what to say to a person unless you like them a lot? The Rebbe once said, and again a famous story, the Rebbe told Sharon not to get on a plane. And when they asked the Rebbe, how did you know the plane was going to be hijacked? The Rebbe said, I didn't know. But when I'm talking to somebody, out of love and empathy, the right words come. So I said, don't get on the plane. I don't know why. But when you care about somebody, the right words will come up. So if you can give that impression to every person you meet, that they are your favorite, they are your best friend, it means that you really care about them. And that's where the wisdom comes from. Number 3. She had a great way of criticizing. It was brief, it was blunt, and it was bloody. Because when she criticized, you knew you had been called. Because just as she knew exactly what to say to everybody, which was friendly, positive, and so on, she could get to the real core of what it is you're doing wrong. Go right for the jugular, and so innocently, so nonchalant, without any rancor, without any bad feelings, without just an observation from an older woman. Take it or leave it. And you took it. That's what it says in Pirkei Av, in Eshes Chayil. Piha poscha b'chachma. She begins with wisdom. She begins to speak with wisdom. V'teiras chesed al l'sheina, and the teachings of kindness are her language. Kindness that is just intuitive, instinctive, without wisdom, is a very limited diet. If somebody gives you only kindness, because that's all they have to offer, it's nice, but even potato chips you can have too much. You got to have something else besides. So just kindness is not wisdom. True wisdom, true das, is a combination of kindness and strength. If she was able to compliment you and make you feel like $1 million, she was also able to criticize you and make you feel like a worm. And you never resented it because she's right. She's right. What are you going to do? Number 4. There were very few things. I mean, I can't even think of one. Of material goods, material pleasures. I can't think of anything that she really cared about. The house was simple. Everything was simple. Whatever she needed, she had. What she didn't need, she didn't want. Keeping it simple. There were no complicated matters to her. It was good, it was bad. It was right, it was wrong. It was appropriate, it was inappropriate. There was no fluff. There was no unnecessary activity. There was no unnecessary conversations. There were no unnecessary concerns. So when she said brachas in the morning, or Shema at night, or Shabbos candles, there was no shtick. It was simple. And the more simple it was, the more careful and the more perfectly she did it. Because when you keep things simple, you stay focused on the truth. So there was no frum shtick. There was no holy put on. You do what you do. You do what you do. I mean, if that's what you do, then how could you not do it? I was 70 years old. That was not a long time ago. I was 70 years old. I was in the house. All the cousins, nephews, the whole family was there. It was Motzei Shabbos. Everyone had made Havdalah. And they were saying V'yitin L'cha. I was going to go home and make Havdalah at home. So I wasn't saying V'yitin L'cha. And my mother says to me, V'yitin L'cha is not for you? And my nephew cracked up. He said, you're 70 years old, you're getting mussar from your mother? There's no hope. I got nothing to look forward to. Simple, direct, uncomplicated, uncluttered. Not saying V'yitin L'cha. That was keeping it simple and simply keeping what you're supposed to keep. Number 5. As simple as her life was in terms of materialism, that's how sophisticated her life was when it comes to talent, excellence, things that counted. She had such good taste. Only the best, only the greatest. She was not impressed with mediocre in anything. If something was really wise and really correct, she was very impressed. If it was, she wasn't impressed at all. She heard me lecture many, many, many times. She was impressed once. Said, when you're good, you're good. Once in 70 years. Because when you're not special, then you're not special. in everything, in music, in art, in wisdom, in goodness. She had such good taste. Coming from a little shtetl in the Ukraine, you don't expect this.
How did you get you all the confidence?
What confidence? Number 6. There are people who are smart and know what to say on every occasion. There are people who are even smarter and they know what to feel at every occasion. Now, the Gemara says, don't laugh at a funeral and don't cry at a wedding. Why does the Gemara have to say that? Because people tend to do that. Their emotional IQ is not very great. So their emotions are not appropriate. When you're supposed to laugh, they cry. When you're supposed to cry, they laugh. Or when you're supposed to laugh, they don't. And when you're supposed to cry, they don't. Or when you're supposed to cry, they shed a tear. And when you're supposed to laugh, they giggle. My mother's emotional IQ was like that of an old chassid of the Alter Rebbe. Always the right emotion and full. I've never heard anyone grieve the way she grieved when my father passed away 13 years ago. You've never heard such heartbreak. And when she met her sister, whom she hadn't seen for many, many years, at the airport, you have never seen such joy and excitement. So she was fully there, emotionally, and not at all hesitant to express what she was feeling. So when she grieved, it was real grief. Awesome. And when she was happy, it filled the room. Emotional IQ. And finally, she lived not only with the anticipation of Mashiach, she lived as if Mashiach had already come. And for the last year of her life, that's what she said to everyone who came in. Mashiach, in a little song, Mashiach is already here. What are you doing to welcome Mashiach? Do something. You know, when people get old, she was old. In fact, when she turned 100 and she wasn't feeling so well, and my sister said, "Ma, what's the matter?" She said, "I'm feeling my age." And that was the first time. So she started to get old at 100. And she often said, "Who expected to live to be 90? 100? Way beyond any expectation." So you expect, people get to be 100 and, how much further can you go already? So naturally they start thinking about Mashiach. I just hope Mashiach comes before my time is up. But that's desperation, and that's, she was not. She was excited about Mashiach. And she mentioned it to everybody, including the non-Jewish nurse. She had her saying, "We want Mashiach now, and Mashiach is coming, and Mashiach is here, and Mashiach." The ability to look forward when you're 100 years old. Do you know anybody like that? First of all, do you know anybody 100 years old? And if you do, are they not always talking about the past? What 100-year-old looks forward? Or without dread? Not dreading the future. Excited about the future because Mashiach is here. Things are going to get good. Amazing. And I think that looking at what's happening in the family since she passed away, which is only a handful of months, she's doing something in her own quiet way, getting things done, no nonsense, just what has to happen, make it happen, it happens, next. So to sum it all up, there are people who are chachamim because they have chachma. They can be very good people, they can be very annoying. You know, these very bright people you can't stand. They have chachma, but not much else. And not only do they have not much else, they don't know what to do with their own chachma. They're like a little overwhelmed with their own brilliance. They don't know where to put it, they don't know what to do with it, because that's all they got. And then there are people who have a lot of bina. They're really insightful. They analyze things and they figure things out, and they're really on target. But they're not wise. They know a lot, they're smart, they have a good head. They're not wise. Wisdom is a whole different thing. There's the expression, a smart person, a chacham, can get himself out of any predicament that a wise person would never get into in the first place. The difference between wisdom and chachma. A wise person, the person who has das, that's a whole different human being. And that's why in the Shemona Esrei we say, Atachein l'odam das, and we say, Chachma, Bina, and Das. But the Das is the emphasis. Chaneinu mi'itcha Chachma, Bina, v'das. And that bracha is called Berchas Hadas, even though Chachma and Bina are mentioned too. But that's not. So, Motzei Shabbos, Ma'ariv, in the bracha of Das, we make Havdalah. And the Gemara asks, why is Havdalah in that bracha? And the answer is, because if you don't have Das, then you don't really know the difference between Shabbos and weekday. You don't really know the difference between Kodesh and Chol. Das is that ability to distinguish. It's discriminating. It's like you know a lot of many things, but you don't know where to put it. You know that there are problems you can't solve. And you know that there are problems that you must solve. But you don't know which is which, because you have no das. So you try to solve the problems you can't solve, and you neglect the problems that you should be able to solve, because you don't have das, the ability to discriminate, to know what's what, to know where things belong. So you have a lot of good things. You don't know where to put it. You don't know how to set it up. You don't know what comes in the front, what goes in the back. So your priorities are not always correct, because there's no das. Your sensitivity is missing when there's no das. You can't feel another person's pain. You can't share another person's joy, no matter how smart you are, if you don't have das. Das makes you sensible, meaning you sense things, you feel things. Without das, you're not margish. You don't feel. You don't feel the shame of inappropriate behavior. You don't feel the pleasure of appropriate behavior. Das basically means a person who is internally healthy. When you're internally healthy, you are modest by nature. No need to embellish, no dramatics, no show. to put on, no need to make an impression. I remember she was in the hospital, and we were worried how her mood was. This was when she hurt her hip years ago. And in the hallway, there was this woman from Russia, speaking Russian. I said, "Where are you from?" She said, "Uzbekistan." I said, "That's great. Come talk to my mother." And I thought my mother would be so happy to see someone from Uzbekistan and to talk Russian and to... "Hi, how are you? You okay?" There was no attempt to make an impression. There was no unnecessary excitement. It was like, yeah, fine. So she speaks Russian, so she's a human being. And which reminds me that this clip where this Israeli something official was speaking to the Rebbe, and you know that they were having a very pleasant conversation by the dollars, and then he says to the Rebbe, he says, "You know, my grandfather was from Lubavitch." And the Rebbe says, "You don't have to bribe me. I like you the way you are." "Wow, your grandfather's from Lubavitch." Talking about you. So what's the difference? Where you're from, what language you speak. And the best of all stories that shows this quality of life and this simple, direct, artless emes. I came home one day from 770. We lived just a few blocks away on President Street. I don't remember how well, 16, 17. And for some reason, something I never did before, I said to my mother, "What's for dinner?" She said, "Food." I never asked again. What's for dinner? Something to eat. Something to eat. You're particular? What's wrong with food? So I don't know if that comes from growing up in a time of hunger, but it was so real. It was so real. And enough said. She never had to repeat it, and she never had to explain herself. Dinner is usually food. You don't like it, don't eat it. But it's food. You need a menu. You need advance notice. Keep it simple. Keep it real. Stay focused on what's important. Don't get excited about things that don't deserve your excitement. And don't worry about things that don't deserve your anxiety. Look at life and its opportunities. And if you can't see so well, well, then you hear better. You can't hear so well, well, you can still be coordinated and accomplish things and make eggs by yourself and don't have to depend on anybody else. And when your hands stop working, well, you still have memories and you can tell people things that you remember that they don't. There's always something to live for and to live by, if you keep it simple. So what is the greatest virtue that encompasses all the others? Simple. Life is simple. Truth is simple. Yiddishkeit is simple. Being a mensch is so simple. If it starts to get complicated, you're going in the wrong direction. So keep it simple. Simply do what is simply necessary, and not any less and not any more, and you'll never have any regrets. I've never heard my mother express a regret. Is that good? Hmm? Well, people get a little older and they start regretting. Oh, yeah, I should have done this. I should not have gone. There was never the second guessing and the agonizing over whatever is, and you do it simple. Does that sound good? And this took a whole 20 minutes to say? It's so simple. We should all be inspired by that. If we could all be simple, we could all start living Mashiach-dik. Because what's going to happen when Mashiach comes? It'll be simple. Right will be right, wrong will be wrong, people will be good, animals will behave. Why? Simple. Because it's the way it's supposed to be. If it's supposed to be, you do it. Why does it have to be complicated? Why does everything have to be torturous? Why does everything have to be so? It's not. Don't wait till you're 100. Start when you're 60. No, start now. Start now. And you'll have no regrets. Because you never regret a simple truth. What's to regret? But that is really amazing. They say about the Rebbe that once he makes a decision, he never doubted himself. He never went back. He never said, oh, well, maybe, now that I think about it, no, maybe not. Never. But that's because he's a Rebbe. But something like that, even a non-Rebbe can have if you keep it simple. Keep it simple. So simply have a great winter. Simply have a lot of good news. Simply do whatever you can to bring Mashiach so that the world will become simple. Simple is good. What do we do now? There are some people who are very hypersensitive to noise. Any noise. But you're not talking about noise. You're not talking about the sirens outside. You're talking about mental noise. Mental noise means you're not keeping it simple. You're taking in too many things, worried about too many things, distracted by too many things. The secret is focus. Get back to what is important now, here, for you. That clears up the noise. So you have a house full of kids, and there's a lot of tumult, and there's a lot of screaming, and there's a lot of... Okay. And you're doing what? Resenting? Feeling overwhelmed? Out of control? You want to call the police? A riot squad? A SWAT team? What do you want to do? A house full of kids should be noisy. You have a house full of kids and it's quiet, you're going to get arrested. What are you doing to those kids? So if you have a loud house and it's positive loud, kids are having a great time, remind yourself that when that ends and they're all out of the house, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss it.
question is about how to give criticism in the sense that we know that anytime we see a human being, whether it's a friend or a spouse or a child or a coworker doing something that is rubbing us the wrong way or we think is wrong or whatever, it's all a reflection of what's in here. They're all mirrors. And so my question is, you said your mother was very direct and told you when something was wrong, but what about the school of thought of don't say anything, look inside yourself, where are you exhibiting that same behavior, fix that in you, and it will disappear out there. So I'm just wondering when to know which is the right way to go about it.
They're both true at different times and in different circumstances. Sometimes what you're seeing is just annoying you because you're frazzled, and sometimes what you're seeing is wrong and you're supposed to say something. Takes a little wisdom to know which is which, right? But I think that what I saw in my mother, if you're going to criticize, if it takes more than one short sentence, you've got it wrong. It's not a criticism, it's a lecture. What are you lecturing? People don't like lectures. It takes too long. One sentence, if you can't express it in one sentence, then you haven't thought it through.
So we should think before we criticize our kids, basically. That's all that is. So how do you have to know the difference? When are you criticizing because it's rubbing you the wrong way? And when are you criticizing because Hashem really said that?
Again, the answer is, if one sentence will suffice, then it's good. If you need more than one sentence, then you're just out of control. You're just venting.
I'm always out of control.
Really?
Okay, 90% of it.
Join the club. But really, if you want to know whether your criticism is valid, if it takes more than one sentence, you're not criticizing. You're making a speech. Even an injection in the doctor's office, it only hurts for a minute. If it hurts for more than a minute, stop it. So a criticism should be clear, sharp, to the point, and done. If that's not effective, then don't do it. Then think it through a little more until you get it straight. In your own mind.
Sometimes lectures have their place.
In a classroom where kids are bored anyway, you might as well lecture them.
I'm talking about something that's really not going the right way, and you really have to explain to them why.
We don't practice Musar speeches. Just say what's right, correct a mistake, and move on. That's right. Now, I've given my kids a lot of lectures. Never effective. Never effective. There was one time in Minnesota in the winter, when you go out, you have to get dressed. A lot of dressing. And then you come back in, and you're all wet, covered with snow, children particularly, right? So here's, maybe you don't know if you don't live in Minnesota. To get your boots on over your shoes when they're wet, impossible. So what do? The mother comes up with a brilliant solution. You put plastic bags on your shoes and then slide them into the boot, and you've solved the problem. So my son was about 8 years old, and he's sitting on the stairs trying to get his boot over his wet shoes, and it's not going. Huh? Mm-hmm. So he gets a little frustrated because it's not going, and he says, "I can't get the stupid boots on." That's called vulgar language. So from the kitchen, I heard him say this, and I said, It's okay if the boots are stupid as long as the person wearing them is not. I just thought that was really cute. 2 days later, some of his friends were over. And I heard from the other room, one of his friends said something about the blocks were not fitting together properly. He said, this stupid thing is not. And my son said, it's okay if the blocks are stupid, as long as the person do. My only success. You keep it short, you keep it simple, and your kids don't resent you. Isn't that good? Once in your lifetime, everybody's entitled. Yeah. All right. Keep it simple.
But seriously, if the criticism was blunt, how did it build confidence?
That's how. You don't bury them in criticism. Criticism doesn't hurt. It's all the baggage that comes with it. A kid never says, yeah, you corrected me on that. Never said. He said, you're always after me. You're always complaining. See, it's not the criticism. It's the style. Anyway, this was not supposed to be a lecture on how to raise kids. This was just supposed to be a little inspiration from a great woman who did nothing all her life. Thanks for listening. Shalom Aleichem. How are you? You know, I do a lot of talking, a lot of Zooming, many classes, many subjects, but that's all formal stuff. Hopefully good stuff, but formal. We also have a Wednesday night meeting that's more informal and kind of Hamish. If you want to join us for that kind of an event, interactive, time for questions and so on. If you want to join us for this side of conversation, click on the link below and join us every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock. Well, maybe not every Wednesday night, but we try to make it every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock, a more informal chat, which can be more enjoyable at times than the formal stuff. So check it out. Click on the link and join us. Try it, you'll like it.